You ready?
Okay, I think we're all good.
Are you okay with scrolling?
Yeah, that's fine.
I haven't figured out how, because it's a PDF. I haven't figured out how to make it like a proper presentation.
Okay. Yeah.
Will you be okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I will be.
Sorry, this presentation has been suboptimal today.
No. All right.
Did
Cool.
printouts was okay?
Printouts is great. Yep.
Right, I think we can start.
Okay. Oh, you need kind of.
Oh, yes.
Am I leading you?
No, it's fine. There's one or two more.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's begin. We're on a tight schedule. So it's my pleasure to introduce Isaac Wilhelm, who's going to be telling us all about centering perfect naturalness. Take it away.
Thanks, Ezra. Thanks so much, Barry, Oliver, everybody else who contributed to organizing, and all of you for being here. So I'm going to be, the title of my talk is Centering Perfect Naturalness. I'm going to be, the ideas here have grown out of kind of two related threads of research I've been pursuing. One is about how I think that centered propositions could be objectively chancy, and I think we should think that because it solves all sorts of problems related to the Everett interpretation, problems related to even the coherence of certain debates that Lewis participated in connection to the principle, problems related to cosmology and elsewhere. The other thread that this grew out of is I, in part because of that work on philosophy of physics and indexical expressions, I've become more and more convinced that there's something metaphysically fundamental about indexicality. And I've got a couple of papers squirming around trying to make that sense precise. This is part of one of them. Okay. Perfect naturalness. So very roughly put, to a first approximation, perfectly natural properties in the, and I'm drawing on Lewis, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to say very much about Quine. Drawing on Lewis here, perfectly natural properties generate a certain sort of privileged predicative structure in reality. They carve at the joints is the metaphor that's often used. Similarly, for perfectly natural logical constants, if there are any such things, those generate a privileged logical structure in reality. I'll say a bit more about exactly what I'm taking perfectly naturalness to be in a second, but just by way of preparation, to set up the thesis, think of it like this. Indexicals, what are indexicals? Very roughly put, indexicals are words whose meanings depend in a systematic, well theorized about way on context and circumstances of evaluation. So common examples, I, here, now, that, you, us, we, these are all indexical expressions. To keep the talk relatively concrete, I'm going to be working with a Kaplanian approach to indexicals, but that's not terribly necessary. It does, however, make certain things a bit easier to swallow. So just very quick, the background sort of way of understanding the semantic values of indexicals that I'm going to adopt here. And I should flag this term semantic values. I'm using this as a term of art. It just means whatever an expression. So you've got some expression, Isaac, that name. The semantic value of Isaac is like this thing. You've got another expression, it is 2 meters away from. The semantic value of that expression is a certain sort of relation, a physical relation. And then you've got indexical expressions, and their semantic values are intuitively just what they mean. Slightly more precisely, the semantic value of an expression is the contribution the expression makes to the truth value of a sentence. So let me just tell you, and my thesis is going to be about the semantic values of indexicals, because I'm not going to claim that there's anything fundamental about that inscription on a piece of paper or about I, the sound wave that I just produced. I'm going to be claiming that what's fundamental, what's metaphysically fundamental in a certain sense, are these semantic values. So what are the semantic values of indexicals? So on Kaplan's approach, semantic value is a certain sort of function. It takes in a context, a time, and a world, and outputs an agent. You can sort of regiment it formally like this. C is a context, which we can just take to be a world. T is a time, W is a world. C sub A is an agent, a particular agent. Which agent? That's going to depend on the context, time, and world in question. the agent is going to be the person who, in the relevant context, made the utterance of the indexical expression, or wrote it down on the stick or whatever. So so a couple things. First, the time and world are often jointly called the circumstance of evaluation. Second, if you're squeamish about talk of functions, so I think there's this unfortunate feature of how philosophy was taught, how logic in philosophy gets taught. It's very predicative. I kind of think the better way to think about the ultimate structure of reality is in terms of functions, particularly the sorts of functions, the predicate-like functions get expressed by higher order languages. So that's why I'm perfectly okay to think of a semantic value as being a certain sort of function. If it bugs you, though, you could just think of the semantic value of I as being a four-place relation that obtains between context, time, world, and agent. And then the function part just gets in there because given the first three items put into this relation, the fourth item is determined. It's a functional relation. Okay. So that very roughly put is what perfect naturalness is. That very roughly put is what indexicals are. Here's the thesis I'm going to defend. The semantic values of some indexicals, including I, here, now, and that, are perfectly natural. Okay? So perfect naturalness is often taken to be linked to fundamentality. And insofar as it's kind of thinking of perfect naturalness in the manner that Lewis does, it's linked to fundamentality is appropriate. I'm claiming that there's a certain kind of inherent fundamental subjectivity to reality. The inherent fundamental subjectivity comes by way of these relations that are what indexicals express, being perfectly natural and so metaphysically fundamental. So in a paper version of this talk, I give a couple arguments for this, a warm-up one and a main one. I think there's not really enough time to go through the warm-up argument in detail, but just very quickly to give you a feel for how I'm thinking about perfect naturalness, at least, here's how the warm-up argument goes. Basically, the warm-up argument is just, look, we can march through a bunch of the characteristic theoretical roles that perfectly natural elements of reality are often taken to play, and plausibly the semantic values of indexicals play those roles. So one example would be this particular function that serves as a semantic value of I is eligible to serve as that semantic value in a way that other functions out there, given a sort of abundantist conception of relations, are not eligible. So, for example, I'll refer to this thing throughout the talk occasionally. Let Gry be the following function, define it piecewise. It's the function I before the year 3000. It's the function U after the year 3000. Okay. If that's confusing, don't really worry about it. Just think of it as some groupified thingy. But that is actually a complete definition of it. That function is less eligible to serve as the semantic value of our utterance of I than what is in fact the semantic value. So that shows that's a reason for thinking that the semantic value of I has this eligibility, this reference magnetic feature that perfectly natural items are often taken to have. Same with explanation. Going back to Perry, 1979, I think, in fact, gives an explanation in terms of indexicals. Right from the beginning, we have indexical, getting a bit interested in indexicals to some extent. We have indexical expressions playing a sort of important explanatory role. So why did I fix the torn sack of sugar? I fixed the torn sack of sugar because I realized that I was causing a mess. Not because Gry realized that Gry was causing a mess, because I realized that I was causing it. So again, best explanation of the phenomena invokes the semantic value of I and not some other semantic value. Indexicals can't be defined for third personally. I don't have time to go into exactly why, but there's all these arguments for thinking that, and I mean, part of the philosophical interest in indexicals, in like, Sleeping Beauty, Elga type cases and so on, is precisely because, or comes from the fact that traditional answers to standard philosophical questions about third personal phenomena just can't really be given, or at least not as easily, for the corresponding indexical phenomena. And finally, I think it is objectively valuable in the way that certain people who like perfect naturalists tend to claim, to theorize in terms of the semantic value of I. And that's why a lot of our moral theories are about how I should treat you rather than how Isaac should treat Susie or something like that. Okay, So the warm-up argument just goes through these features of perfect naturalness, which I also wanted to do just to kind of give us a bit of a primer on perfect naturalness, and just says, look, the semantic values of indexicals have those features, so perfectly natural indexicals holds. There's an objection to what I've been saying so far that's going to be an occasion to make a couple of what I hope will be helpful points for the main argument to come. And the objection goes something like this. There are other characteristic features of perfectly natural properties, let's say, that the semantic value of I does not have. So for example, that semantic value does not make for similarity or dissimilarity in the right way, because one referent of I could be you and another referent of I could be me. So two things to say about that. First thing is that I'm not taking any one of these conditions to be necessary for being perfectly natural. There are posits that I think, there are theories according to which other stuff is perfectly natural, apart from stuff that can bear properties. So maybe some quantifiers or true functional connectives or items like that can be perfectly natural, but they don't make for objective similarity or dissimilarity. Second response, which I just want to emphasize, the object to which a given utterance of I ultimately refers is not the semantic value of I. The semantic value, the contribution which this expression makes to the sentences in which it occurs, is that relation. The object to which it ultimately refers, to try to put it somehow or other, is one of the relata of that relation, the C sub A, the object that the function is mapping the context and the time in the world to. So when I claim that the semantic value of I is perfectly natural, I'm not claiming that this lump is perfectly natural, because this is not the semantic value of I. That would be claiming that a particular object was perfectly natural. I am claiming that a particular relation that I think figures inelimitably in a lot of really important theories perfectly natural. Okay. So here's the plan for the talk. The rest of the talk is going to consist of one big and what I take to be a fairly interesting argument for perfectly natural indexicals. It's based on worlds featuring two-way eternal recurrence. Just to give you a primer, here's how it's going to go. I'm going to argue that in worlds featuring two-way eternal recurrence, certain standard views of reference end up failing. To rescue those views, you need something like perfectly natural indexicals, or at least you can, in a very effective way, appeal to perfectly natural indexicals. The reason the view of reference ends up failing is because in the sorts of worlds I'll be discussing, you can shift interpretations between sort of isomorphic epochs in a way that ensures that a lot of the interpretations that on this particular view of reference are like the best interpretations all disagree about the meanings of various expressions. So that's in very rough outline the sort of argument that I'm going to give here. So let me start by presenting this standard view of reference. So let A be an agent, and let M be the collection of interpretations that are maximally good at capturing the appropriate truth values of A's sentences. So these are the interpretations that do quite a good job at assigning true to the sentences that intuitively these interpretations should be assigning true to. I'm not saying the interpretations that do the best job of always assigning true. I think for a variety of reasons you don't want to say that, like, I don't want to consider that class of interpretations. But the interpretations that do like extremely, extremely well getting the stuff that should be true, true, and the stuff that should be false, false. So take all those interpretations, say that the ones that are best in that class are the ones that map the predicates that A utters to perfectly natural properties. Then, and this is how the standard view of reference goes, an utterance of A has a particular meaning, just in case all of those best interpretations map that utterance to that meaning. So intuitively, this is basically saying that reference is determined by eligibility plus use being understood in terms of what sorts of utterances you can make true or false. Perfectly natural properties are playing a role here because they help solve a certain sort of model theoretic argument. So in the background, what's going on is there's some sort of Putnam style model theoretic argument that we're concerned about that's pushing us away from giving a theory of reference a metasemantic theory of reference purely in terms of use, and to rule out some of the sort of complicating interpretations as no good, we're going to say, well, those interpretations are no good. We sort of throw them out of the set of interpretations we look at when we're trying to fix the meanings of expressions, because they're mapping predicates to really GUIfied, gerrymandered properties. So lots of people have held versions of this view. Lewis has held a version of this view. I think Ted has held a version of this view. Williams talks about a version of this view. Sud has recently written a really interesting paper about this view. So just really quick, a lot of people don't hold this view. If you don't like this view, then there's a couple ways you can sort of still benefit from the following argument, and it won't waste whatever it is, 25 minutes of your time. The ways you can benefit is the argument will kind of be more grist for your mill. What you'll see is that in order to get out of some problems that I'm going to raise, first of all, you're going to like the problems that I raised for this view because they're problems for the view. Second of all, you're going to see that the way out of the problems is going to involve positing perfect naturalness, not just for semantic values of predicates properties, not just for semantic values of logical expressions, but also for the semantic values of indexicals. And so you might be like, that's surely a bridge pupil. But yeah, so this is the standard view. So just to give an example of how it works, we've got Yan here. Suppose Yan utters the word Yan. Okay, this is a name, her name. There's a bunch of interpretations under which many of Yan's utterances are true. The best interpretations, according to how the standard view understands best, map the predicates that Yan utters to perfectly natural properties. And now suppose all of those best interpretations, so there's going to be more than one of them, but suppose they all agree, as it were, on what the name Yan means. By which I mean they all map the utterance of Yan to Yan herself. Then the standard view says Yan's utterance of Yan really does refer to Yan. That's how the standard view goes. Okay. Here in a sketch form is the argument I'm going to give. I'm going to give you a world. It's a world, again, of two-way eternal recurrence, where there are multiple ways to interpret the utterances of agents. These multiple ways, both one are maximum.
What do you mean by two-way eternal?
Oh, it repeats backwards and forwards.
Okay. You mean there's stuff running backwards?
Actually?
No,
it's not running.
It repeats.
There's no initial epoch.
I see.
Yeah, there's no initial epoch. Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, there are going to be multiple ways to interpret the utterances of agents, which both one, capture the appropriate truth values, and two, map the predicates to perfectly natural properties, but they're all going to disagree on what the agents mean because they basically all shift the meanings by some number of epochs. Oh yeah. So just a quick sort of asterisk on this. So I haven't seen this sort of argument given in anything like full detail. After I wrote up the paper, I found in a paper by Williams and in a really nice paper by Williams and a really nice reply by Hawthorne, they kind of get into it a little bit. It's like in one of those papers, it's in at the end of half a paragraph, this kind of a problem. In the other paper, it's in sort of a footnote. I'm not really sure the extent to which they had the following arguments in mind, but that's the only place I've been able to find this kind of concern that certain sorts of, as I think Williams put it in terms of mirror universes, this sort of concern that one might have about these mirror universes generating problems for this sort of review of reference. That's one thing to say. Another thing to say is I'm going to give the cleanest formulation of this argument using this metaphysically possible world with this sort of recurrent structure. Then I'm going to claim, or at least I'm going to show how you could generalize the argument to more physically realistic worlds based on contemporary cosmology and contemporary statistical mechanics, and also based on Everettian interpretations of quantum physics. I think the argument is not as good when used on the basis of those worlds, but it's kind of interesting to see that the sort of problem that this sort of two-way eternal recurrence world generates finds a form in these other worlds as well. These like worlds that might just be actual. Okay. So the epic argument, as they call it. Let W be a possible world of two-way eternal recurrence. So here's the picture. Each of these boxes represents an epoch in W, okay? And the world partitions into a series of these epochs extending infinitely far into both the future and the past. We've got agents in each epoch. They're all duplicates of one another. All the epochs are duplicates. So we've got an agent here, a duplicate here, so on. The speech bubble represents the use of language in this epoch. The agents are talking about stuff. Suppose we've got Yan in one of these epochs, and Yan's an astrophysicist. So she's going to want to talk about what's going on in her epoch, and also what's going on in epochs apart from hers. And to do that, she uses a certain sort of language. She uses sort of an unsubscripted language, including words like Yan, to refer to herself and the goings-on in her epoch. And then she uses subscripts on that language to refer to goings-on in epochs apart from hers. So when she utters Yan 1, she's referring or trying to refer to her duplicate in the next epoch. When she utters Yan -1, she's referring to her duplicate in the previous epoch, and so on. Let I0 be the following interpretation. I0 maps Yan's utterances of Yan to Yan. Yan's utterances of Yan 1 to Yan 1, and so on. So I0 is sort of the intuitively correct interpretation. Also, I0 maps the predicates which Yan utters to perfectly natural properties. And I0 maps Yan's utterance of I to its standard semantic value, the function that takes in, again, context, time, world, and agent, the appropriate agent. That's one interpretation. There's a bunch of other interpretations, though, of Yan that one might adopt. So for each n, let IN be the interpretation that shifts the reference, which I0 assigns to Yan's utterances to their duplicates n epochs away. So this interpretation maps Yan's utterances of Yan to Yan n, Yan's utterances of Yan 1 to Yan n+1, and so on, okay? Also maps the predicates which Yan utters to perfectly natural properties. And finally, maps Yan's utterances of I to a certain GRUified sort of function. It's the function which, given a context and a time and a world of an utterance, outputs the agent, which is n epochs away from the agent who made the utterance. Okay? So for example, just to get a feel for how these interpretations work, consider Yan's utterance of the sentence, I am Yan. Let's see what this sentence means and whether or not it's true according to the interpretations I've just given you. So according to I0, the utterance of Yan refers to Yan. The utterance of I, its semantic value is that particular function, which when you plug in context, etc., refer to Yan, or outputs Yan. So ultimately, the sentence is saying Yan is Yan, according to I0, so it's true. According to IN, the utterance of Yan means Yan n. The utterance of I means a GRUified thing that takes in all those inputs and outputs Yan n, the duplicate n epochs away. So according to each IN, the sentence says Yan n is Yan n, so the sentence is true. All right, so here's the problem that the standard view faces. Here's the argument against it. First premise, Yan's utterances of Yan refer to Yan. Second premise, each epoch has the same distribution of perfectly natural properties. Third premise, each IN is maximally good at capturing the appropriate truth values of Yan sentences. And then fourth premise, if 1 through 3, the standard view is false, so the standard view is false. Okay, that's the epoch argument. It's on your handout if you want to refer to it later. Justifications. So premise 1, I kind of think is actually the most objectionable premise. So I'm going to give two different sources of support for it. The other premises we're going to see basically just follow from the definitions of the interpretations and what the standard view is, what duplication is. So premise 1, first justification is it's just extremely intuitive to claim that in this sort of a world, an agent can successfully refer to herself. That Yan's utterance of Yan really does mean Yan herself. There's a more theoretical reason to accept the first premise that has to do with practices in physics and mathematics more generally. So sometimes when people are presented with the Max Black sphere case, they say things and someone's trying to talk about each of the two spheres and introduce names to them. People say things like, how does your name latch on to one of the spheres? They're duplicates. They live in the sphere. I never really understood what the hell was going on with that objection We do this all the time in mathematics and physics. We have a space with a bunch of duplicate objects that stand in duplicate relations to one another. We name them. This is what coordinate systems do in, for example, Euclidean space. Point is a duplicate of each other, stands in duplicative relations. A coordinate system is just a naming convention. It's a way to introduce names. You talk about the origin, 0, 0, 0. I think this is a perfectly reasonable, possible thing to do, to use names even in situations where there's this kind of perfect symmetry among all the objects. And that's basically what Yan is doing here. To deny the first premise on the basis of some sort of concern about can a name pick out one duplicate among many is kind of, I mean, you do that, you got to deny that we can pick out we can, label a point as an origin. In Euclidean space, you got to deny all sorts of uses of coordinate systems in mathematics and stuff. You shouldn't want to do that. Okay, premise 2. This just follows from standard accounts of duplication. So it follows from Lewis's account where X and Y are duplicates just in case there's a certain sort of isomorphism between them that preserves perfectly natural properties and relations. Just follows from how I define the epochs in this world of two-way eternal recurrence. Premise 3 follows from the definition of the IN. I only worked through one example, the sentence I am Yan. I showed you how the IN all get the same truth value for that sentence. But you can do this for a lot of other examples too, and the IN just always reproduce the intuitively correct truth values for the sentences that you're giving, or at least they don't differ with respect to how well they do. And premise 4 just follows directly from the standard view, because the standard view says, in order for Yan's utterance of Yan to in fact mean Yan, all of the best interpretations got to agree that that's what her utterance means. So if they don't agree, as in fact the other premises sort of assert, then the standard view has got to be false. Okay, so that's the epoch argument. The standard view is in trouble. So some interesting generalizations of this argument that I've been messing around with. I would be interested to hear your reports about your intuitions about this. Okay, so the first generalization is to a kind of macroscopic version of the world of two-way eternal recurrence. So there are a couple results in some contemporary cosmological principles and some principles of statistical mechanics suggest that our world might be macroscopically very much like the two-way eternal recurrence world that I just had up on the screen. What I mean by that is, and the background sort of formal results, I mean, there's many different types of these results for many different sorts of dynamical systems. You might have heard of the Poincare recurrence theorem, ergodic theorems. The background mathematics and physics is the following. The world is such that the same macro state will repeat again and again and again, and has repeated again and again and again. In fact, each sequence of macro states will repeat again and again and again. This has to do with the consequence of a lot of these theorems, that the microstate of the universe is sort of tracing out a path that doesn't miss any bits and pieces of the sort of macroscopic decomposition of a state space. So we don't have the situation where there's exact microphysical duplication, but we have something approximating. There's a certain sort of approximate macrophysical duplication. And I think that also poses a problem for the standard that's analogous to the problem I just had up there. The problem goes like this. It's the exact same first premise. The second premise is a little bit different, and I've underlined the places where this argument differs from the argument I showed you before. The second premise is that each actual world epoch, actual meaning because it really is actual according to these scientific principles, has the same macroscopic distribution of perfectly natural properties. Each IN, and I just don't have time to get into how you have to slightly modify the interpretations of the IN for them to be sensical. You have to modify them because there will be microstates of subsystems in one epoch that don't have an exact physical duplicate in the next epoch. What they will have is a macro duplicate, an approximate duplicate, and you just need the IN to kind of map in a way that conforms to that kind of similarity. But anyway, that's not a lot of detail. We can talk about it more if you want later. Each of these, I claim, is maximally good at capturing the appropriate truth value to the Yan sentences. And then fourth premise is basically exactly the same, except for with these underlying changes. If 1 through 3 standard view is false, so the standard view is false. So I think here the weakest premise is probably 3 or 4. Basically, the quality of this argument is going to come down to what you think the relationship is between microscopic goings on and sort of reference understood as a macro phenomena. So I'm thinking, so first of all, one of the problems with this argument is I'm thinking that Yang can intuitively refer to sort of sub-micro states in her epic, and there will be therefore some sentences whose truth value might not be preserved by these IN. So that would be kind of a way to try to argue that some of the IN are different in quality from other of the IN. Getting into the detail, it just gets really messy to try to evaluate them. They all kind of end up, when I go through the details, striking me as being reasonable to claim that these IN are still equally maximally good at capturing truth values. But that would be probably, I think, the best way to push back on this argument. The reason that I find this argument somewhat compelling is because I do think of reference as a macroscopic phenomena. I don't think of it as depending super sensitively on the underlying details. So I don't think of it as the case that, for example, if God were to snap God's fingers right now and change the microstate, but keep the macrostate entirely intact, that all of a sudden my words would, for example, fail to refer. I think I still would be successfully referring to this thing. It's kind of like a Tibbles on the mat sort of intuition that I have about this. Anyway, yeah, wanted to mention that. Okay, second generalization. What am I doing? Okay, I'm a little over 30 minutes. Second generalization is concerns branching in the Everett interpretation. So, there we go. Okay, so a little bit of background, not a whole lot of, sorry for time constraints. The Everett interpretation of quantum mechanics says something, some interpretations say something like the following. You've got the quantum state, which sort of describes all of reality, but the classical world of experience is just a branch within that quantum state. Sometimes this is described in a kind of discretized way. Like there are 4 branches here, that one, that one, that one, and that one. That's not correct. It's not even close to correct, technically speaking. What's going on is really, it's just we don't want to have to do the LaTeX to draw the figures in the journals. There's like a branch density here, and the branch density is sort of splitting apart as, you know, the branches split apart. But the way to think about how many branches there are isn't, you shouldn't be thinking of it in terms of cardinality. You should be thinking about it in terms of this mathematical probability density, the mathematical measure that's kind of quantifying how many branches there are. Understood that way, the sort of cardinality number of branches is always going to be uncountably infinite. The point that David Deutsch makes a few times, and it's something I've really latched onto in some of my work because it's important for certain sort of metaphysical considerations. This is going to be one of them. Because there's an uncountable number of duplicate branches to ours, you're going to be able to do a kind of shifting of meanings in our branch as well as in the two-way eternal recurrence world. And that generates this Everettian epic argument. So again, same first premise. Now though, instead of looking at sort of epochs in time, we're looking at branches going all the way up across time. They all have the same distribution of perfectly natural properties. They're all duplicate branches. We've got interpretation sort of shifting meanings among them. And if 1 through 3 again, then the standard view is false. So the standard view is false. So those are 2 generalizations of the epic argument. In big picture terms, what's gone wrong is this. The standard view of reference does not allow for reference to occur when there's lots of symmetry in a world, because you can sort of use the symmetry to shift what agents mean among the sort of duplicate objects that there are. Okay, we're almost done with the big argument for perfectly natural indexicals. To the rescue, the indexical view. What I'm going to do now is, and again, if you don't like the standard view, I'll try to give you reasons to think you have to endorse something like the standard view, some sort of appeal to perfect naturalness somewhere in your metasemantic theory of how reference gets fixed. So I'm sort of offering you this improved metasemantic theory, thinking this is sort of as much in the spirit of the standard view as you can stay, and get out of the problem that I've just presented. Called the indexical view. It's very much like the standard view. It says, same thing about usage being a contributor to meaning. So you're still letting M be the sort of interpretations that respect usage in the relevant way. And number one, you're still requiring that the predicates that the agent utters be mapped to perfectly natural properties. But number two, you're now requiring that the indexicals that A utters be mapped to their perfectly natural semantic values. That's the part where you need perfectly natural indexicals. You need there to the semantic values of indexicals to be perfectly natural in order for this view to make any sense. And then you say again that an utterance has a referent, just in case all the best interpretations map that utterance to that referent. Okay, so suppose you were then to try to give an argument analogous to the ones I've been giving against the indexical view. Here's how it would go. Same first three premises, just the fourth premise and the conclusion gets changed. If 1 through 3, then the indexical view is false. That's how the argument would go. Argument's no longer sound, though. Premise 4 is false, since the IN are mapping indexicals to semantic values which are not perfectly natural. So they get thrown out from the sort of collection of best interpretations. Okay, so to summarize this main argument, the standard view does not allow for reference in duplicate worlds. Perfectly natural indexicals, by way of the indexical view, does. So you should endorse perfectly natural indexicals. Okay, so I'll discuss one solution. One objection, then we'll wrap up. The objection goes like this. It makes an observation, which I am actually going to agree with. The observation is that there was nothing especially indexical-ish about the problem that I formulated here. Okay, so here's how I put the objection. So like, Yan utters Electra is an electron. Okay, now let IN prime be just like IN, except that IN prime maps indexicals to perfectly natural semantic values too. All these interpretations are going to disagree on what this name Electra means. Okay, and the reason for that is I prime 0 is mapping Electra to Electra, the one in her epic. I prime 1 is mapping Electra to Electra sub 1, and so on. But the objection continues, and this is the part I will disagree with momentarily. The IN prime do an equally good job of respecting the truth value of the sentence, Isaac, that you gave me earlier. I am Yan. And that is true. I will disagree with the spirit of the point. Therefore, the objection concludes the indexical view is false. So what's going on? I agree that the problem that I raised is not unique to indexicals. You can generate it with names as well. The solution, however, you can use indexicals in the way that I did to solve this problem too. And the reason is because in our languages, indexicals and non-indexical names coordinate. We use sentences in which they both appear. And requiring the interpretations to respect the truth values of those sentences means that if you have a constraint which says the semantic value, the indexical part of that expression has got to go to a certain sort of function, then in order for the whole sentence to get assigned the correct truth value, the semantic value of the other part of the sentence is going to have a certain sort of value as well. So just to work through it in detail, these IN prime are not maximally good at capturing the truth values of the end sentences. Each one does get the truth value of that sentence correct. But consider the sentence, that is Electra. So these interpretations are mapping, remember, Electra, I0 prime maps the name Electra to Electra, I1 prime maps Electra to Electra 1, so on. But they all have to map this indexical. I'm understanding indexicals in terms of demonstrative, all these sorts of impure indexicals count as indexicals, all that sort of stuff. They all map that to the intuitively correct function for the meaning of that expression. And so I1 prime is going to interpret that as electron as saying that Electra, because that's the output of the word that, is Electra 1, which is false. Big picture terms, what's going on is, by imposing this perfect naturalness requirement on the semantic values of indexicals, I can ensure that the semantic values of the non-indexicals which often figure in sentences featuring index schools. I can ensure that those semantic values get mapped to the intuitively correct, those utterances get mapped to the intuitively correct semantic values as well, because language involves this kind of coordination between our indexable and our non-indexable expressions. So I have no need for the hypothesis that also the semantic values of names like Electra are perfectly natural. Okay, so that's the talk. In order to secure reference in worlds featuring two-way eternal recurrence, and more generally worlds with lots of duplicates, including macro duplicates and Arrhenian duplicates, perfectly natural indexables is required. Thanks very much.
Very well. Cool. So we have just over 45 minutes. Michele, start us off, and then the rest of you keep your hands up until I look at you. I'll write you down. Go ahead.
So I wanted to ask, so you have the standard view, but I feel like it's pretty impoverished. The
Okay.
standard view includes things like causation.
Yeah.
Once you have that, I feel like you can just get out of this argument, because just think about that and point to this chair. Now this is eternal recurrence world with all these other chairs. The question of why I'm referring to this chair, nothing to do with perfect natural. This chair is the only one that's in contact connection. So if that's a story about how I can refer to this chair, opposed to these other chairs and these other universes that go after and before, that's it. It's naturalness plus causation, and that's going to explain. Talk about I. Maybe I means the thing that's serving the scene. Maybe, as PP said, I think it's having these thoughts, and then instead of causation, it's going to be acquaintance. But yeah, I feel like if you supplement this on the view, as you should, with things like causal constraints and reference, you can just get out of those arguments.
Yeah, good. So I feel like you can't, because I feel like you can do the same thing with cause. And that's why I want to have perfect naturalness play like a deeper role. So I agree that there are going to be other, the standard view is a very sort of pared down version of this approach. A lot of stuff is playing a role, but I don't think causation will be sufficient, because I could ask, like, what will fix the referent of cause?
But I mean, there's just facts about what causes what. This chair is causing my utterance of that, and that's what makes it so that I'm referring to this chair. That's the view. Causation is not in the theory. It's not part of the, it's just this fact about the world, that this chair, like these other chairs in these other future and past recurrence, is the only one as is called a connection to my utterance. And this fact is the one that's making it true that I'm referring to this chair when I say that. And the same account can be applied to I, or yeah.
Like I am Isaac, this object is causally connected to my utterance.
Well, I means something like the thing that's thinking these thoughts, something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's this fact about what causes what, not about what I mean by thought.
Well, but in all those descriptions, you're using a lot of indexical expressions. In my sense of indexical, it's the thing that is thinking this thought.
Yeah, so that's just like pointing to the chair.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of indexical.
Yeah, it is, but the way why.
So if those don't get their intuitively correct semantic values.
But they do get it, because they are the only thing among all these other candidates that have this connection to me.
So you point at the chair, you say that.
Yeah.
Imagine a gruified interpretation which takes as input.
That chair is not a possible world.
Yeah, the duplicate.
That chair is not causally connected to me. That's why I'm not talking about that chair.
There will be an interpretation of cause that
But cause is not in the
takes
theory.
the map. Yeah. I think, yeah.
Oh, go ahead if you want to.
Well, I
I'm sorry.
I totally take the point. Yeah, I think there's a background question about to what terms in a language, to what terms in what parts of your theory can the just more theory maneuver be applied, and I think it can be applied to all.
Okay, on my list, I have Dean, Jonathan, Adrian, Veronica, Helen, Barry, David Wheelers, and Ted on Zoom. Am I missing anyone? Okay, Dean, you're next.
So what happens when most terms that we use don't, there's just no plausible way to map them onto perfectly natural properties? Like all of them are like that, except when we're really doing something special.
Yeah.
Don't you need to appeal to degrees of naturalness, and you're balancing use and degree of naturalness. But if if you agree with Lewis about that, I take it that that's his.
Yeah.
He doesn't think, try to find a perfectly natural property for chair. If you do that, doesn't that open up the possibility that, the right balance here for the, indexical relation, with the various indexical relations that is gonna be, really natural ones, but maybe not perfect.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. So this was, yeah, I didn't say this and I should have. For simplicity, I was just using this notion of perfect naturalness, I think, for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. Like sufficiently natural would have been a better way to put it, and there's some sort of cutoff there. I don't know what that cutoff is, and I have no good theory of it, and there's like reasons that people just theorize about, like it's a very messy notion, so that's why I don't like talking about it, but I think you're totally right that. But I also don't think that switching to sufficiently natural would cause any problems for my line of thought. Were you thinking it would?
I wasn't sure how strong you wanted your conclusion. Like, I'm perfectly natural, you know.
I'd say I'm as natural as anything we've ever talked about.
Oh. Oh, wow.
You're as natural as a part.
Yeah, I'm as natural as a core.
Jonathan.
Thanks, actually. That was, my question is somewhat in the ballpark of Helen's house.
Yeah, good.
So I was proposing a kind of causal constraint. I was thinking that there's also a kind of psychological plausibility constraint on interpretations. So like, yeah, interpretations should be pretty charitable and getting like things to turn out true, but they should not just respect a principle of charity, but also a principle of humanity. They should be sort of plausible things to attribute to creatures like us. And yet you can have the same response of like, oh, that's just more theory than we can reinterpret. So that's why it's sort of in the same ballpark. And then what you sent back to well, like, all these terms are just reinterpretable. But you yourself can't fully think that because you can't think that natural is reinterpreted. That can't be just one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe maybe you're, I don't know if you want to say more like, why isn't like psychologically plausible? There's just facts like independent from here. What's actually like how
Okay. What? Yeah.
there's
So-
metaphysical glow by your lights. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
There's also like we have some structure too, glowing structure, but we have some structure too. That's also.
Yeah, I'm thinking there is, and I think things like speaker intention will also figure in fixing the reference terms. Are you thinking that's enough to get out of the problem without perfectly natural index goals?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I don't want to go with speaker intentions because I think
Okay.
content that needs to be interpreted.
Yeah.
I'm just saying like it's not psychologically plausible to think that Jan is talking about someone several blocks away, maybe because of lack of causal contact, or maybe just it doesn't seem like the kind of thing that, imagine like never mind Jan the astrophysicist, Jan's in a community with like children who don't know about that
Yeah.
situation, and they are sort of we have to figure out how they're using it. It's not possible. They things are talking about 75 talks or
Yeah. Couple things. So one, I do want to say that Yang can talk about that stuff. That's what her subscripts are doing. So it's not that it's implausible to interpret any utterance of hers as referring to those. It's that it's implausible to interpret all of them or something. But then where you put the quantifier there matters, like, because in her subscripted language, there will be an n such that Yan sub n refers to Yan. It'll be so I-50, it'll be the one that sort of shifts the meaning of Yan minus 50 to Yan. So she is able to refer to herself. I guess the point, the way I put it is, you're concerned like that these are it's psychologically implausible to say that Yan has these abilities, but I think just the normal interpretation is saying that she has these abilities. Because the normal interpretation is already allowing her to refer to all these duplicates across all the epochs. It's just the ones that are, which term is referring to which is being disagreed upon by the interpretations. Does that, yeah,
Yeah, but I think the interpretation also plausibly should cover children's use of the language in a uniform way to use.
right, so there will be non-astrophysicists who don't know about these things, yeah, good. So right, so my response to you, that part of the response works for people who kind of, for whom it is psychologically plausible that they can refer or want to refer to something like this. And then is it, I guess I don't know. Well, I'm not sure because, you know, I think should refer to all sorts of ridiculous stuff all the time. Like, so, I would want to hear more about what counts as plausible and implausible, why these interpretations are not that plausible. I guess that's one way. And then the other way is to kind of keep making this just more theory complaint. There was another thing you brought up though that I wanted to discuss very briefly. That's okay. The thing about can't you do just more theory on perfectly natural? I think you can. There's another paper where I do, and I sort of go through a bunch of ways of responding to that, and ultimately the conclusion I come to is to get out of this problem is just ubiquitous, this Putnam model style. The only way out of it is to just sort of adopt as part of your like sort of metasemantic theory that there is some term for which you can't do this move. There's some piece of language, piece of your meta language for which the just more theory move is in some way inapt to apply. And you can say that the piece of meta theory language to which it's inapt to apply is perfect naturalness. You could say that it's causation. You could say something like that. But that's a very weird metasemantic constraint, sort of metasemantic force to posit out in the world. And then I try to suggest that that's how we should think about what reference magnetism is. Reference magnetism is the feature of reality that is such that Putnam's model theoretic just more theory move cannot be applied to it. And it's a very long way, but that's why I feel that's the thing I have in my head when people give this kind of what about causation or what about.
Cool. We're doing fine for time. We've got about 35
Okay.
minutes. So I've got Adrian next on the queue and then Brian. So go ahead, Adrian.
Thank you. Here's another variation on the standard view, and I'll give it, and then I have two questions about it. One, would things go bad if we went that way? And two, does that get you out of the indexing problem? So this variation is going to be less optimistic about our abilities to refer, but it's going to say for the Yan case that it's not that the perfectly natural thing that Yan can refer to is just the equivalence class of all the Yans in the recurrence and not any particular one. Intuitively, that does seem a little bit more natural because we're not arbitrarily going to any one of them. It does say it is less optimistic because it says, okay, Yan can't refer to any particular one, only the equivalence class. But in general, for the symmetric worlds, it does seem like the equivalence class of all of the integer things is more natural than any other particular things. And it does seem that if you go that way, that there's no longer a problem of shifting around. So do bad things happen to go with that sort of view?
So the view is, is that equivalence class the meaning of Yan's utterance of I? Is that what you're saying?
It would be so if in the standard view the semantic value the I is like a function from worlds to the utterer or to a groupified version of the utterer. I think would say the semantic value is a function, just a constant function to take the utterer and then you take the equivalence class of the utterer and that's the value.
So the value is it outputs the whole equivalence class. Yeah. So I guess the reason I might not like that view is because I'm I'm thinking that I just means a single person and not a fusion or a plurality or a set of them. Whereas on the equivalence class view, I think you're gonna have to say that the referent of I in a context and a circumstance of evaluation is gonna be a big plurality of people. All me and all my duplicates. But even saying me and all my duplicates is redundant because on this view, I think me just picks out all the duplicates. So I just think that's not the correct semantics for that word. Yeah. So I guess that's why I wouldn't want to say that.
Okay, is it more determinate to be like this particular person? And do you get out of a problem of the many sort of thing of indeterminate reference there? Where that gets to be a particular thing, and then you still have an equivalence class problem.
Sorry, I don't follow the thought. Yeah.
Do you secure the determinate reference to particular utter emittive sort of like what is the even if there isn't a most natural thing to say that's the utterer and not plus a hair minus a hair.
Oh, that
Seems like there you have the same sort of can't refer to a particular thing problem as in the equivalence passage.
I see. I haven't thought much about how that phenomenon interfaces with the theory I've been proposing. I'm thinking to address those sorts of issues, I'll have to also adopt a supervaluationist semantics or just some sort of, I guess I would think, my hope would be some sort of standard solution to that problem I'll be able to plug it into this theory and it'll work there as well.
But you wouldn't want to plug it into my equivalence class theory to make that work as well.
Yeah, because just like, I mean, all electrons are duplicates, but do you think when a physicist talks about that electron, they're talking about all the electrons? No,
If you can't
they're talking about that one.
If you can't tell them apart based on where they are in relation to others, then maybe
Is it, so that electron is orbiting a hydrogen atom. They're all orbiting that hydrogen atom? They're all orbiting a hydrogen atom?
Wait, before we go further,
I should probably.
Gordon, was this a finger on this?
It was the same point, like just
Yeah.
with Tibbles. It
Yeah.
seems like you're gonna go, yeah, well, there's something determinacy of reference there. Right? It's not that when I say nine cat, I'm referring to billions of cats, that's the right thing to say. But there's some indeterminacy about which object I'm referring to. And it seems perfectly, it doesn't sound like there's great cost in saying that Yan is partially referring to each copy of Yan. Because any practical reasoning that she uses those sentences in will either do the same actions.
I don't think that's true. Yeah, definitely not.
Okay.
Like-
I would have thought for the same reason that Yan is, this is Yan, but all those sentences are, she's not going to be like, oh, now I've got to, like, if I want to make eggs for this Yan for breakfast, oh, do I do it now or do I have to wait for 57 epochs? Like, none of those things.
Oh, okay, sorry. So I was thinking like she's like, I hope I win the lottery. And then there's some wait, sorry. Is the proposal something like you could solve this problem with a supervaluationist semantics over the duplicates? Is that the idea?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, you had your first premise and you said, oh, in a way, this is the most contentious.
Yeah.
This is a suggestion for rejecting the first.
I see. Okay, so a couple things. First of all, that's different from referring to all the Yans or something. This is to sort of change the background logic, and the idea is something like the appropriate semantics for utterances when we've got a lot of duplicates is a supervaluationist semantic. So it's some sort of indeterminacy semantics. Is that the
I feel
thought?
like the Yan case is a little different from all electrons are doing this to each other. The shifting argument is only going to work when history is invariant under shifts.
So what is the proposal? I'm not totally sure I see the proposal yet. I was reaching for supervaluationism because that's at least a concrete proposal.
she partially refers to each copy of the.
What is partial reference?
I mean, it's,
I don't,
it's some generalization, some very mild generalization of what you're calling reference. That is a relation one can stand into many things when the world has a global symmetry. Sorry, I was trying to channel what I thought you were.
Yeah, I like the connection to practical reasoning too. It seems like if you would get different results in practical reasoning, then you can't run the perfectly natural argument because you have different outputs, and the one that gets sort of the correct practical reasoning, that's the one, and that's going to be the actual one. But if there aren't any differences between practical reasoning, then it's sort of it might as well these terms might as well refer to any of the copies because they're indistinguishable and you can do everything you need. You can communicate just as well with any of these terms, even if like the terms go into very different worlds and you use them in the same sentence, just because they're indistinguishable. So you could say that the terms don't even successfully refer; they only do this quasi-reference thing, but it's all fine.
so this, yeah,
Last thought on this, and then we're moving on.
okay, yeah, last thought. So my thought is just there's no theory here. That's the short version. The slightly longer version is that's interesting. I think there could be some interesting notion of partial reference. Perhaps it would be like linked up to notions of partial truth or like degrees of truth or something like. I don't know. Like, yeah, that's a cool suggestion. But that requires a lot more detail than's been given, and I can't see how to make appealing to a partial reference relation is here's a much simpler thing you can do. Take a particular relation to be perfectly natural. It's I at least know what that theory is. So I guess the ultimate, I mean, the stuff that happens at talks, like people have some sort of idea for like, here's another way to go. And I don't want to say that this is like an incorrect way to go, but I would just, yeah, it's gonna require more fleshing.
Okay, Veronica and then Helen.
A very brief thought. Theodore has a quite developed idea like this, but uses the word
Oh, cool. Okay.
Reasonably well behaved. So
Okay.
anyway,
That's good though.
I wanted to say something that was related to Dean's question. I was agreeing with Dean that you don't need anything quite as surprising as your claim in order to get out of the worry and the symmetric worlds. So I want to just like say that again. And also to add that there are these kind of very similar worries that John Hoffman has talked about and people have talked about, that where your solution seems not to work.
Okay.
So I'm worried that the solution like too strong for your cases and too weak for other similar cases. So it seemed to me that in your case, all you need is that certain kinds of relations, like the relation between a thinker and a thought, is more natural than the relation between a thinker and a thought, like an epoch after or
Yeah.
an epoch
Yeah.
after. So you just need this more natural than, and because the use facts are matched in symmetric cases, then you just need this relative naturalness claim. And that one of these relations is more natural, and the other seems like very plausible independently, and you don't need to think like I'm special or any kind of surprising, spooky indexicality of reality. It's just like, oh, there's this one relation that's more natural than this other. Now, it seems to me like that there's these other cases where this doesn't quite do the right work. So the Jordan Hawthorne cases are ones where it's just like by sheer accident, there is a planet far away where things are exactly the way I think they are. And in fact, in my environment, I'm completely confused. And so he argues that from the standard view, you get the prediction that, in fact, I'm referring to the stuff over there, but that seems really weird, like it's a sheer accident, it's like far away. There's not even any kind of nomological connection or causal connection. So I think those cases are much worse. And it seems like just saying, oh, the indexical is perfectly natural doesn't really help because the interpretation that maps you to the other environment is just much better in terms of use. And the relation that relates you to that is like only a bit less natural because you can define it in terms of the indexical one. So it seems like it's gonna outweigh the use factor gonna outweigh the naturalness facts. So I feel like those cases do show that the standard view is hopeless, and I think that's a reason why some people only treat it as like a toy theory.
Yeah.
And it seems like yours. So yeah.
Yeah, so good. I agree with a lot of that, except I would just balance it differently. I think the eligibility thing will out. And I would actually, this is part of what I want to claim is like a virtue of my view is like I can get out of that problem. But I don't have a good, I and most of us don't have a like precise theory of how to balance the like degrees that are coming, like degree of like matching use versus eligibility. So I think you could reasonably disagree. I just think that function is so gruified that like, of course you should rule out the
I think you
interpretation.
can define it in terms of like spatial distance, and it does not. You can define it in terms of the normal indexable, your perfectly natural indexable, plus.
Yeah,
like,
it's
oh, the
this
person who
piecewise.
has this distance from me, and that's like a very short definition. I would think that's still quite elegant.
Yeah, I see. I'm not thinking length of definition necessarily correspond, because like length of definition is a language relative thing, and so really got to do this in the correct language. That's sort of a service. Like, what is the so in the correct language, the length might be longer. That kind of concern.
Okay.
Anyway, that's what I was thinking about the Hopper, but I do kind of. I think it just might be a disagreement about how the balance comes out that two people could reasonably have. Well, there was a first thing.
But you only need the comparative naturalistic
Right.
relations.
Yeah.
That's not any kind of metaphysically physicality.
I think it is. Well, I don't know if it's spooky, but like, yeah, I think it is striking. It just it's still claiming that it's like a pretty, like a sufficiently, a very natural. Like the meaning of I is as natural as like all these other things. Is
Did I say one last?
It's quick.
It only needs to be more natural. It doesn't have to be natural for any particular degree.
that's true, right? It has to be
More
more
natural.
natural than this other
Threatening
stuff.
alternative.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, Helen, and then we've got Ted on Zoom, and Barry, I got you in.
Yeah, I'm passing.
Oh, you really? Oh, okay. So, Ted, if you're there.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Isaac. So I'm sorry to both you and Jonathan. I couldn't be there in person. I had 10 middle schoolers over for a sleepover until 4 o'clock today. So it was a little crazy here. So here's the Kaplan semantic value for the word I. It's let's say it's a 3-place function or a 4-place relation. It's a relation that holds between x1, x2, x3, and x4, if and only if x1 is a person, x2 is a time, x3 is a location, and x4 equals x1. Okay?
Yeah.
So it's like a projection function, but restricted to the first has to be a person, the second has to be a time, et cetera. So no way that's perfectly natural because you got to restrict. But anyway, forget that. We're not going back to Dean and Veronica's point. I don't get why you're saying it's any kind of indexicality in the world. It's just a relation. Just say it again. R, X, Y, Z, W. If X is a person and Y is a et cetera, et cetera. So saying that's indexicality in the world is like saying if the world has a 3-place betweenness relation for space, then there's irreducible spatial perspectivalness because, like, from X's point of view, Y is closer than Z's. It's not. It's just relation, okay. So here's a possible. Here's the thing that made me. Okay, here's a possible concern. You kept sliding. Well, there's a possible slide from the A to B. A is the object, which is this, in fact, the semantic value of the word of a certain indexical, is a perfectly natural relation, or is a somewhat natural relation. 2, indexicals are natural.
Yeah.
That's the second is not the same thing, but you said it that way a lot. So as long as we're clear, what we're saying is that there's this relation by a certain semantic theory, maybe the best one. It's a relatively natural relation. Great, but that's nothing like, people like Caspar Hare or A theorists or Kit Fine on time or all, any of these other people who think that, the view from nowhere is not a complete description of reality. It's nothing like anything in that ballpark.
It is like something in that ballpark.
It's not. It's if it is, then the three-place between this relation is, because you can spin that is from the point of view of one of the relata, such and such is going on with respect to the others.
So the slide that you were pointing out is a necessary one. So this will be an excuse for me to pick a bone that I've had with you for a long time. So when you
hey, this is not about me, it's about you. That's kidding.
We want our theory, we want to ascribe perfect naturalness to something. Something some people say is the logical constant is perfectly natural. That can't be right. The constant is a piece of language. Something someone could say is like the indexical, meaning a piece of language, is perfectly natural. That cannot possibly be what's meant. So what's meant has got to be something else. And I think the sort of best construal of what's meant is that whatever is out there that's being picked out, is not a great way to put it, by that written inscription is perfectly natural. Now, I think a lot of people are not clear about what that thing picked out is. And I should, don't come at me just because I was more clear than everybody else about what indexicality amounts to. Nobody else says. They don't say. So, like, I don't know what to do with this non-view that's like been presented. Like, indexicality is fundamental. Well, it can't mean the language. Oh, but I don't mean the semantic value either. What the hell do you mean? So the reason I went with the Kaplanian way of understanding the semantic value is because it is for the sake of precision and clarity. Like when other people say there's no view from nowhere, that's a shitty metaphor. We got to do better. And the best way to do better is to stop talking about the indexical is perfectly natural. That's a piece of language. The best way to do better is to talk about something like what that indexical refers to. I mean, refers is a bad word in this context, but what it means, semantic value, that's the better way. And then, yeah, there is a particular relation out there that we take to be the semantic contribution which the indexical makes to the truth value of a sentence. That's the thing that's perfectly or sufficiently natural.
Sorry, I wasn't disagreeing with that. I was saying that the fact that the referent of the indexical, which is just this four-place relation, is perfectly natural. It's this object. It is signified by a first-person pronoun, but when we're trying to understand the significance of the fact that that object is somewhat natural or perfectly natural, we should forget about the fact that that's what it was referred to and just look at the object and say, what's the significance of the fact that that object is perfectly natural? I'm saying, well, it doesn't have anything to do with the first person. If there had been no, if nobody had ever had the word I, there would still be that function or that relation, and it would so in its naturalness status would be the same regardless of whether there had been creatures which were capable of thinking about themselves and looking about mirrors and being surprised and so on. So it's not.
That's true.
So
but if it had the word and, that function would also still have been perfectly natural in some.
Of course.
That function is just a three-place relation between a proposition and a proposition and a proposition.
Right.
Ted, you can't see this, but Barry has been vigorously agreeing with you throughout.
Oh, I like that.
I basically put it to what I was puzzled I had about your book.
Yeah.
It sounded as though you were saying there's something incomplete about the objective conception of the world. Okay.
Yeah.
The question is, what is it exactly? Ted exactly told you what the object was that you were referring to.
Yeah. I mean, I told you. It's a four-place relation.
But it's in the objective world.
Well, yeah, indexing. When somebody says indexicality is in the objective world, what do they mean?
Well, I think that they mean.
I'm giving you an answer to that question.
In our language, we use words in a particular way.
Yeah.
Such that when we translate other people into our language, we translate them in a particular way. So it's a certain fact about use.
I mean, yeah. I think what I'm saying is compatible with that.
Isaac, there is a little bit confusing thing about what it means to say the objective view is complete, given that one and the same content can be expressed both by indexical language and by third by non-indexical language. That's correct. So what people often say is one can give a description using non-indexical language that is in some sense complete. And I'm not saying that there are no problems with that formulation, but the claim would then be, I can use language with no indexicals to express all the facts that are there to be expressed using that four-place relation. Like I did it when I was just, I was characterizing the relation. The point was to describe the relation from a non-indexical point of view. And,
Yeah.
and then to say, if there's some sense in, some sense in which something has been left out, we haven't yet been given that sense. And it doesn't do to say, well, those contents can also be expressed by indexicals, because I've already conceded that.
So good, thanks. That's helpful. So I was thinking that is what it is to be using an indexical. I agree with you that you can refer to that relation using both an indexical. You can use semantic. I think inscriptions have a ton of plasticity with respect to what semantic values. Like what is it to be an indexical? It's just to play a certain sort of functional role in a language. And so like an indexical view, there is no view from nowhere. I'm just thinking. Sorry, could you go over that part again? That I felt like I was understanding your point the best.
I could say something, but Ezra, do you want to cut me off?
Maybe just last thing, and then we've only got a bit of me on the queue. We've got 10 minutes.
I never got my.
Let me stop, and then I'll be in tomorrow, and we can hash it out.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Barry, apologies.
So actually, the question I was really just gonna ask is that naturalness usually is thought of as connected with laws.
Yeah.
The notion of naturalness is not at all connected with laws.
Well, I hope that it gets connected to laws.
But it's not it needn't be. And connected now to, if someone were to say, here's what the world is, and given an account, a third person account of the world, they would, in a certain sense, you'd be giving a complete account to the world. Now, what's important, and what you emphasize, is that we use indexicals and we can't get along without them.
Yeah.
And I agree with that completely, but it doesn't mean that there's anything in the world that when God created the world, he would have said, oh my God, I forgot the indexical facts.
It doesn't mean that, no, but I'm thinking.
I forgot the index.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I'm thinking
God would be referring to anyway.
So I'm thinking, I don't know how to put it in terms of this metaphor. That was a good way to put it. God did. The complete description of reality is going to use this relation, which does count as an indexical, because it's how we pick it out.
But it's not an indexical. It's just a.
It's an index. It's the semantic value of an indexical, yeah, because an indexical is a piece of language. But in that sense, and that is the only way it makes any sense to say.
But then Ted's point that the people who really want to say that that the view from nowhere is leaving something out that's important are not going to be very satisfied with that.
Yeah, I guess I see the thought. Yeah, you're thinking like because that semantic value admits of a third personal description, those people are going to say, it's a weird complaint for them to make because their view is characterized so far, at least in our discussion, purely negatively. You know, when they say the view of nowhere leaves something out, they don't mean like you need to use this symbol. They don't mean the semantic value, what that symbol means. What do they mean?
I thought you were one of them. So.
No. I think the best construal of what they in fact mean is that it's this four-place relation, which of course you can refer to third personally, but everything can be language is extremely plastic. You can use names to denote the function that serves as the semantic value for a quantifier. That doesn't like drain that function of its kind of perfect naturalness, ontological significance, whatever, on a logically realist view. But that's kind of what the direction I think Ted is going. You would say like, look, if you can if Isaac can refer to the semantic value of the quantifier using a singular term, or I don't know, using a predicate, then that sort of logical realism isn't what the logical realists were saying it is, because that semantic value is just an object out there.
It's a food fight at dinner.
Okay, David, and then it's, yeah. go ahead.
Everything I wanted to say, sorry.
Oh, okay. In that case, it'll just be me between you and Dylan, so I'll try and be quick. I thought there is something spooky about this, not that it's like spookily subjective, but that you have a perfectly natural relation whose relator are these weird things. Like, in particular, one is a linguistic context, which presumably involves like the utterer and maybe like the audience. And that just seems like very different from the other perfectly natural, like maybe being an element of is perfectly natural, or maybe being a certain distance away is perfectly natural. But this one is like, it's so different from the others. So it's not like it's inherently first person, but it is very surprising, I think. So I don't know if that's good. I mean, in a way it's good because like my view is spooky. But
Yeah. Good. I mean, I think that's part of what makes it first personal, is that what is it to be a first personal item in reality? It's for there to be this kind of relationship between a context, a time, a world, and an agent. That's just what it is. And nobody has given any theory that comes anywhere close to that level of clarity or precision of what it is to be a first personal element of reality. So that's why it strikes me so bizarre to object to what I'm saying by claiming, well, it's not even first personal. That you're totally right. Like, the fact that it features a context and the circumstance of evaluation is part of what should make you feel like this is a spooky, weird thing. I think because of how I picked it out, it doesn't. Because I picked it out in this third person sort of way. But yeah, I think that's correct.
Ted, did you want to tack something on?
Yeah, something really small. I'm not sure how much this affects the underlying issues, but there's a difference between thinking of contexts as I forget the terminology for this in philosophy of language, but you can think of context in kind of an abstract way as just tuples. And then the relation in question is really just a logical one. You can think of context as these more events. And then the relation between a kind of this, I don't know, thicker or more embodied notion of context and whoever's speaking in that context. That's a different relation. And it's that one that Ezra is focusing on right now. And maybe a question for you is, which one do you mean?
Yeah, I think that is a place where I've been like a bit vague. I haven't told you a lot about what the relata are. Yeah, I could totally imagine a sort of characterization of this relation that took the context to be, like a tuple. What are you thinking? Like an object, a property, and a time, like an event-y Kim sort of tuple.
Right. That's the Kaplan picture, but there's this other, well, at least at one place, but there's this other thing where you think of a context as not having a distinguished carving. It's just, us talking. and there's all sorts of features of that context. Some of them are presumably not relevant to conventions of language. And the relationship between those kinds of things and the speaker is a very different kind of relation than the relation that I was describing when I first asked my question, which is just projecting a tuple into one of its members.
What is you said us talking? What item of reality is that?
Well, just draw a circle. Well, I guess it's kind of if I were there in person, I would say just draw like a 20-meter sphere around the room, or and just say that bit of space-time. All I just mean is something, embodied or physical or whatever that doesn't have a privileged carving up into speaker, time, and so on.
I see.
There might be more. Again, I don't know how much this matters, but it is I felt like sometimes one was more appropriate than the other in some of the discussion today, and it could matter.
I'm thinking it doesn't really matter. I just picked the Kaplan thing because Because I really don't like this tendency in the literature to use a bunch of metaphors and a bunch of my view is nots without saying what the indexicality consists in. But people are really getting hung up on that. So I don't know, like maybe that was a poor choice strategically, but what you're sort of gesturing towards is there's another way, another sort of bit of concreta that could serve as the object to which I want to attach perfect naturalness. And I think I would be fine with that. I think all the arguments would sort of be about the same and the conclusion would be about the same if you took the bubble containing us.
Okay, it's just that on the tuple view, there's nothing involved in that relation about picking out who is speaking or anything like that. Because it's just a logical matter. Whereas sometimes I think you were talking as if the meaning of I does have something to do with that, or the relationship between utterances and relationship between thoughts and thinkers. Maybe that wasn't you. Maybe that was maybe that was Veronica's question.
All right, Isaac, last thing, because we should.
No, yeah, we should. I'll have to ask you a bit about that more tomorrow because I'm not as familiar with that picture. But yeah, thanks. That's helpful.
All right, awesome. Let's thank Isaac.
Okay, my poor planning. I realize in retrospect, I should have had us walking out the door at 6:45 rather than this talk ending at 6:45. About 10 minutes, our reservations for 7. Okay, my goal for us is that we meet at those doors at the entrance of the floor in 3 minutes. Can we do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do
Isaac,
it.
great to see you.
Great to see you.
Looking forward to talk tomorrow. You can come at me then.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. I think that's totally fair.
So I don't mean, why should put that? Somebody can adjust on real.
So I think here's how I put it. So I agree. You could do it. But I was gonna say, were you causation?
Yeah.
I'm
not quite.
Ben would say that. So you're not gonna get stuck.
Please be submitting this.